You're watching or listening to Strangers in Space. And for the next, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, however long it takes, Simon, we are going to be talking about the announcement of the new Doctor Who, so you don't have to. Hi, I'm JR.
Hi, I'm Mark.
Hi, I'm Matt.
And I'm Simon.
Matt, you look absolutely terrified. Are you all right?
Who, me?
Yeah.
No, I realised in your introduction I'd forgotten the order again. it just drops out of my head like alcohol.
We should just make you first, and that's easy to remember, right? Or would you still forget it anyway? So it wasn't a massive surprise, or was it? I don't know. Literally, as we speak on this recording, it's less than an hour since they announced David Tennant and Catherine Tate. Simon, I'm going to go to you first because I stole your joke that you made as we were getting ready for this. So it's only fair that I should come to you first. What are your feelings?
I'm very, very happy at the prospect that Catherine Tate might be served with a really, really great episode.
Well, she wasn't the first time she was in it, so I don't see why you should expect that now, since it's Russell T Davies still. Only kidding.
Yeah, no, obviously it's great news. David Tennant is a kind of a usual suspect, I guess. First port of call if they're going to get a doctor back, maybe. So in that respect, that's not a big surprise, but it's always a welcome surprise. But Catherine Tate for me is the icing on the cake, being my favourite companion. So I'm very happy.
Did any of the three of you expect this announcement this evening? I'd seen it teased, so it wasn't really a surprise to me, but I'm not sure I'd mentioned it to any of you because I've been up to all sorts of other things this week anyway, so I was barely even thinking about the podcast tonight. And yet here it's happened. So did it come as a surprise? Mark, did it come as a surprise, or were you kind of expecting it?
Well, it's interesting because I wasn't expecting anything after last week. We've got Ncuti Gatwa as the new Doctor. There we go. That's grand.
I have a theory on that.
Disappear.
I'll come back to.
Russell T's going to disappear, until Jodie Whittaker's last episode. But that's just another bit of RTD misdirection, of course. So no, I wasn't expecting anything tonight at all. So I expect an announcement every Sunday now until November 2023.
Yeah, or at least till they start recording the episode, right? The anniversary special or specials or whatever it is, once that's underway. Because I suppose one of the things that they tend to do is make announcements about things that they're about to start shooting out in public. Like with the Zygons back in 2013, in April of May or whatever it was of 2013. Suddenly there was a press release about the Zygons are back. And the reason for that was they were filming in a public place with Zygons and might as well make a press release out of it. And that's kind of been the habit since then, to make press releases either when or sometimes only if they're about to do something in public. They managed to, for instance, in the Fugitive of the Dune episode, they managed to keep John Barrowman a surprise because his stuff was filmed entirely indoors, so he was never out at a public location. But there was a press release about the Jadoon, and of course the guest star turning out to be the Doctor was kind of headed off as a red herring, a sort of bit of misdirection by John Barrowman being the first surprise in the episode, and thus we weren't ready for there to be another surprise in the episode. I'm going to come back to that line of thought because I think there's something of that going on here too, tying in with what I said last week about Ncuti. Well, it wasn't even last week, it was just a few days ago, about Ncuti Gatwa's casting. Matt, how about you? How do you feel about this? What were did you have any expectations about it?
No, not really. I'd sort of seen. I'm not on Gallifrey base. I'd seen some rumblings about David Tennant denying that he was in Cardiff, and David Tennant's wife denying that David Tennant was in Cardiff, which automatically makes you think. And we'd been talking about David Tennant for ages. I'd seen rumblings about Catherine Tate. I'm lukewarm about the idea, the addition of Catherine Tate. I'm not the biggest Catherine Tate fan. She's fresh off the Nan movie, so she's at the high point in her career. But I'd be interested to see it. I guess the two hearts and the diamond was Catherine Tate. Then.
Presumably, as a
So
previous TARDIS.
I was kind of half right when I suggested they were going to announce a companion in the run up to the announcement.
Of course, in the fiction of the series, to carry on the point that you were just making in the fiction of the series, she's part-time Lord anyway.
The point I was just making.
But were you going to point out
the point I was making?
But were you going to point out that in the fiction of the series, she's part-time Lord, hence the diamond, hence the square turn on the side?
Well, diamond's the 60th.
I'm just agreeing with you then, Matt.
Yeah,
so I don't see why it's... I don't see why it's such a hard thing for you to do, to have somebody agree with you before you move on to make another point.
No, I think they were just the social media they were putting out meant something different to the one they did before. There's just the diamond represented something other than the TARDIS this time. But I'm interested. So I'm lukewarm in anticipation, but I'm interested in seeing what different things they do with the roles, seeing how it's developed in the meantime, seeing how RTD brings them back, in what context, what else he brings back, what he doesn't bring back. It is feeling like he's getting the old team back together, and it's all going back in time to 2000 and whenever 7 or 8,
yeah.
Which is a bit disconcerting because I'd like to see RTD doing big new things. But I guess we have to wait for Ncuti Gatwa for that to happen. We have to wallow in nostalgia first, and then we'll get through that.
Well, do we have to wallow in nostalgia first? Because last week we were talking about it, and last week I think your contention was that David Tennant would be a guest in Ncuti Gatwa's first episode.
No, my contention was I hoped that would be the case, because I thought that the impact of the Ncuti Gatwa announcement, and the fact that when the Doctor's announced, at the moment it's Jodie Whittaker's show, and so there's some respect to the Jodie Whittaker era. She's the kind of centre, and there's a baton that gets handed over, and I think the new Doctor takes up that baton, and announcing Ncuti Gatwa first, as they did. The impact of that suggested that he would take the baton, and I think that was an important handover. And slotting in a sort of a sidestep into an old Doctor, with an old Doctor at its centre, without Ncuti Gatwa, I thought had the potential for being slightly disrespectful to the actor in a way, and to that idea of the mantle passing over. And I still think that, but I'm open to being corrected by Russell T Davies doing it like sensitively. But I still feel that not starting with a 60th anniversary with Ncuti Gatwa, I still feel that would have more impact. But I am willing to concede that actually a new season opener with Ncuti Gatwa is also an impact point, a point of launching.
Well, that would be my contention.
But then the 60th anniversary becomes a little bit sidelined.
But I think it's slightly sidelined anyway, just by the logistics of where it falls. It's 2 years and a bit after the previous ongoing episode, and it's presumably about 6 months before the next ongoing episode. So wherever it lands, it's going to be like a pebble in the middle of a pond somewhere. It's not going to be connected to anything else around it. And I think in my opinion, I think what Russell T Davies is doing is he is unshackling it from anything else that comes either before or afterwards, and turning into something that stands apart entirely on its own before Ncuti Gatwa becomes the Doctor with the episode that follows it. I'm going to make a little suggestion about the way the announcement's fallen, because I sort of think that you're right, basically, Matt, despite the fact that I didn't think you were right in the wherefores, but I think you're right about the whys. And so I think what's happened is, if you announce David Tennant has taken over from Jodie Whittaker, you get a massive backlash, because all of a sudden you've cast the white guy again, right? And David Tennant, well, let's assume for a moment that David Tennant and Catherine Tate are going to be the main stars in the anniversary special, rather than Ncuti Gatwa, and he's going to turn up in the episode afterwards. That gives rise to the potential for a huge backlash about the BBC backtracking, backstepping on having a woman Doctor by casting a white male. But if you want the white male to be in your Unshackled episode that just by the force of logistics falls between then and when your next Doctor comes, you announce the Doctor that isn't the middle-aged white guy first, and then you announce the guy who's going to be in the episode before that immediately afterwards. And in terms of immediately, in television promotion terms, 7 days later, a week later is about as close as you could reasonably do it. And I think that's what they've done. They've announced Ncuti first to take the sting out of having Tennant in between Whittaker and Gatwa. I think that's what it looks like to me.
I mean, I agree that in terms of a populist approach, it's kind of the perfect thing to do. So bringing back Tennant and Tate in a special is about as nailed on a thing that RTD could do to get viewers watching, and to do that in between that and starting and then anticipating Ncuti Gatwa and getting his 2-3 million Instagram viewers fired up waiting for Ncuti Gatwa to start. I mean, that's the perfect kind of popular approach, to the point of being cynical. That's all I'm thinking.
Russell T Davies
kind
is
of a slightly cynical edge.
This
that
is
he's having his cake and eating it.
Russell T Davies, who had David Tennant regenerate in the middle of a 2-part story at the end of his final season.
And this has occasionally been, this has brought back memories of some of my issues with Russell T Davies. That he is basically, he has a John Nathan Turner side to him that shines strong, basically.
I totally think so, and that's why I've been expecting this announcement to come. I think because this was Russell T Davies at his most cynical and attention-grabbing side. Mark, you've not said anything for a while. What do you think? And Simon as well. But Mark,
I didn't want to upset Matt by talking over him.
No, I'm fine. I've got COVID, so I'm giving no SH1Ts today. We're going to get through this.
I think it's interesting what you're saying, Matt, about having Tennant as you kind of wanted him as a kind of companion to Ncuti Gatwa, but I don't know. I think that has an unintended optic to it as well. It's like that. I remember my colleague Ben Verth pointing out that at the end of Peter Capaldi's run, he gives a massive speech about what it means to be the Doctor to a woman. And there's an unintended visual thing there of, oh well, we need to teach this woman how to be the Doctor because it's never happened before. And I think you'd run the risk of kind of doing that, having Tennant and Gatwa together. It's the populists. I keep calling him the millennial Tom Baker, but actually he's not. He's the millennial Patrick Troughton, David Tennant, in that he keeps coming back. He's always happy to come back. I think Eccleston's kind of more the millennial Tom Baker, the one who's just like, nah, you can have me on my own, but I'm not hanging around with any other Doctors. So I think having this special, and I'm not convinced that it's just going to be Tennant and Tate.
No, we'll see, but I'm going to.
And I'm also not convinced that it's not, because the original statement of RTD coming back was the 60th anniversary and series beyond. Now that didn't say the 60th anniversary special. And series beyond. So there must be. I would not be surprised if we're getting some kind of alternate Five Faces of Doctor Who style thing, where we've got a bunch of old Doctors to celebrate the 60th, leading up to the new Doctor, appearing.
So the equivalent of what you were saying about, I think I agree. Also with Tennant and Ncuti Gatwa being in the same episode, you think it would be a bit like when Matt Smith phoned up Peter Capaldi and gave him advice, which I know actually JR didn't like that, but I quite like that bit.
I like the idea of it, but I didn't like the execution of it.
Sure.
Mark, are you hinting towards the idea we might get a Jodie episode written by RTD? I mean,
well, she's about to have a baby, so probably not, I guess. But then that's
her as yet unborn child.
Yeah.
And here's the thing, Tennant, apparently they've announced this because Tennant and Tate are in Cardiff tomorrow to start recording. The thinking is that Ncuti Gatwa is still on the set of Barbie, which I believe started on March the 20-something. So it's about 7 weeks or something into its shooting schedule. And presumably there's a little bit more time to go on that, because that's going to be a big budget production, right? Which is going to take 3 months of filming time. So Ncuti Gatwa's not going to be around for, well, I mean, he may have finished his stuff. Who knows? We don't know what he's playing in Barbie, I don't think. But presumably he's going to have another few weeks on Barbie before he comes down to Cardiff. So I think that's the thinking here, is that whatever Tennant and Tate are doing, logistically, again, and that's my buzzword for the evening, obviously, but logistically, whatever Tennant and Tate are doing almost has to be without Gatwa, unless the thinking about what's happening with the Barbie movie is wrong. Do you know who's directing the Barbie movie, by the way, Mark?
It's Greta Gerwig, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Who is it?
Mark? Greta?
It's Greta Gerwig.
Oh, okay.
Which actually makes me want to see it.
Yeah.
I wasn't that interested beforehand, but yeah. Because it was supposed to be an Amy Schumer vehicle at one point, was it? Anyway, this is a whole separate.
I mean, it's kind of the concept that, like Tetris, like if they have announced, they have announced the Tetris movie, and I would probably quite like it because it's such an unlikely idea for a movie. But I think it's, well, yeah. Anyway,
there are no bad ideas. There are only bad executions of reasonable ideas.
But there are bad ideas.
No, I don't know that that's true. There are clearly ideas that are wrong-headed, but I don't think there's any idea that you couldn't do justice to if the right people were doing it. And I think Jojo Rabbit is a perfect example of that, because that is an absolutely terrible idea, but it made a brilliant film, right? Simon, we've been talking for ages without getting you in. What do you think of all the things that we've said? Do you think it'll be Tate and Tennant on their own, by the way? And if that's the case, what do you think of that?
I wonder whether it's going to be in the form of some kind of flashback or much like Big Finish have done like various segments which all leads towards a story, pieces on one big jigsaw.
Did you not read the quote from Russell T Davies?
No.
Okay,
He doesn't say it's not a flashback, to be fair to Simon. No, he says, "Oh, is it a flashback?
No,
is it okay?"
No.
But
that's a red herring, isn't it?
The thing that I'm thinking about in terms of, as you're saying, Simon, this kind of winder thing, is that I'd heard from somebody that Russell T Davies is writing it like a comic book. Now, that's obviously a very broad term, and that can mean anything. But obviously, if you look at Marvel, or you look at stuff that he said in the past about, well, you would have a whole series of Matt Smith and David Tennant at the same time, that's why I'm thinking, is he experimenting with the idea of a multi-Doctor story that's actually taking place across like a number of episodes, with not necessarily the Doctors interacting, because we've never seen that on screen. We've seen it in the comic strips, we've seen it and we've heard it on Big Finish. We've never seen it done in the TV show, really.
No, you look at the 5 Doctors, you could extract each of the Doctors into a separate story.
Well, I've had a big thought on that, so I might as well say it. I think that Russell T Davies thinks, well, David Tennant is in his 50s now. He could easily play the Doctor. Still, he wouldn't quite look like the 10th Doctor, and he couldn't quite have the energy of the 10th Doctor. Plus, we have seen what the 10th Doctor is like for 3 series and a bunch of specials. And to have the 10th Doctor, that 10th Doctor, back again for another series would literally be treading old water. So how do you go about capturing that magic without just retreading old ground? You get David Tennant back to play a new Doctor. And let's face it, when Tom Baker turned up in Day of the Doctor and said, just a few of the favourites, eh? I could be an old face again, why not? What else is Russell T Davies thinking but ping, David Tennant? If I come back to Doctor Who, I'll do a series with David Tennant. So what do? You introduce David Tennant in an episode that everybody's going to watch as part of the ongoing Doctor Who narrative. And then you say, right, that's the new David Tennant. Let's have a series with the new David Tennant to go alongside our series with the new ongoing 14th Doctor. And you don't number him. You just stick in there in a series of his own at the side. I think that makes much more sense than to have like 3 or 4 series going on with old Doctors at the same time. Why would you have old Doctors rather than new Doctors? It's a bit like Big Finish.
I'm not saying 3 or 4 series. I'm saying 3 or 4 episodes in an anniversary year.
Whatever.
You say that comics, Titan Comics, exactly what they've been doing.
Yeah.
Sure, but there's a world of difference between comics that you're selling to people who are A, fans, so predisposed to buying into the fiction, and B, people who buy comics, so a different crowd from people who turn on a television of a Friday, Saturday, Sunday night just expecting to be entertained. I think what you do is you do something that resembles that, but is different enough from that you can capture all the people who wouldn't ordinarily be predisposed towards enjoying those things, as well as
I think starting the announcement with David Tennant and Catherine Tate is the thing that captures the attention of the people that wouldn't be the non-Titan Comics readers, and then you can put a Paul McGann episode in, or well then you're kind of limited to actors that would be willing to come back, because Eccleston won't come back.
No.
Capaldi probably would come back because he's denied it enough. Well, Matt Smith, he's probably gearing up for Morbius too,
he did say he would rather do
Game of Thrones
Doctor Who than work with Jared Leto again. So
yeah, so
he's
so
on
Matt
record
Smith,
as saying those
Matt Smith could come back, but you need more than just two. So Paul McGann.
Well, yeah. Do you know,
Sylvester McCoy walks with a stick now, so unless they CGI legs on him to go like this.
Liberal use of the question mark umbrella, Matt. That's what I would say.
I think the thing about the pre-McGann Doctors, if you're having those, you're getting them in cameos. You're not giving them full episodes. I don't think they are, with the best will in the world. They're all 10 years older now than they were even at the 50th anniversary, right? I think he's getting on a bit then.
McGann is so pre-McGann, yes, but not including McGann, because I think McGann doesn't have to play the Doctor he was playing because that was open-ended.
Yeah, it was just for one episode, wasn't it?
So he's like, and he's still got it. He's still got that kind of doctorishness. I think McGann could pull it off, but he wouldn't be a draw, I don't think. But then David Tennant, Catherine Tate draws you into this multi-episode, multi-Doctor story. I don't know.
Going back to what Russell T Davies said for Simon's benefit, this is a very short press release, and in a tiny little soundbite, Russell T Davies has, for some reason, gone to the point of doing this when he could have said anything else instead. He says they're back and it looks impossible. First we announce a new Doctor and then an old Doctor along with a wonderful Doctor, but then he goes on and says, what on earth is happening? He says maybe this is a missing story or a parallel world or a dream or a trick or a flashback. The only thing I can confirm is that it's going to be spectacular as two of our greatest stars reunite for the battle of a lifetime. Two things to pick up from that. One, he wouldn't suggest any of those as the thing that it's actually going to be. He would suggest alternatives, red herrings, and the actual thing it's going to be is something that's not on that list, probably. Now, the actual thing could be on that list.
That would technically make it a trick, then, which he's just announced as a red herring.
I'm never going to bring the Master back. I have no plans to bring the Master back.
Yeah.
This is Russell T Davies.
This phrase, the battle of a lifetime. I mean,
no, you're missing the point here, Simon.
Well, go on. Why am I missing the point? Before I even say what I'm going to say.
Well, the point.
No, don't you start getting. This is me in a temper.
The whole point of this quote is, if it's a multi-Doctor story, why does he have to say, how's it going to happen? So why does he take the press release that introduces the return of David Tennant to lay the groundwork for it not being a multi-Doctor story? So it's not going to be a multi-Doctor story, and it's not going to be a parallel world. So it's not David Tennant that went off with Rose. It's not going to be a dream. So it's not going to be they wake up at the end and it turns out not to have happened. It's not going to be a trick. In other words, it's actually happening. David Tennant is going to be playing the Doctor, and it's not going to be a flashback. In other words, it's not going to be a Doctor Who story from when David Tennant was the 10th Doctor story. It's David Tennant as a new Doctor, and Russell T Davies has laid the groundwork right here in the press release that he's put out to announce him.
Well, looking at what he announces, then it's more likely to be a multi-Doctor story, because he doesn't say it's not a multi-Doctor story. That's the one thing.
Everybody knows how multi-Doctor stories work. You don't need to lay the groundwork for that. That's the whole point. If he'd have just said they're back, David Tennant and Catherine Tate, everybody reading that would have said, 60th anniversary, multi-Doctor story. He's laying groundwork for doing something that's not what people expect.
Okay. I think he's pretty successfully covered all the bases that it could be.
And that's why I think it's going to be something that's not in that list.
like a trick.
But it's not a trick if David Tennant comes back as the next Doctor.
I was picking up on the phrase "the battle of a lifetime." A lifetime being a incarnation of the Doctor, and
It
therefore
lasts for one
Ncuti Gatwa.
episode.
Yeah,
So
that's
David
my
Tennant.
thought.
Well, David Tennant turns up at the start of the episode and regenerates again at the end of it.
I'm kind of reminded of the Sherlock
Nice one,
Holmes,
Simon, by the way.
the Sherlock Christmas special. I'm kind of reminded of the Sherlock Christmas special. I wonder if Russell T Davies has taken a leaf out of Stephen Moffat's book when they set the Sherlock episode back in Victorian times, and you had months of speculation about, well, this isn't a flashback, it's not a dream, but it was sort of a dream.
It was a dream, yeah.
Sort of a mind palace-y thing. I quite liked it. I like that. So I think it might be something like that. But then that would be a trick.
But
Or
then,
a combination of things. Or it
but
could be a
then-
missing court story as a trick.
Well, it could be, but you say Russell T Davies is taking a leaf out of Stephen Moffat's playbook, and the most obvious leaf out of Stephen Moffat's playbook is that he's regenerated back into an old face, because that happens in Doctor Who, and there's a precedent for it. And you know, Russell T Davies saw the Day of the Doctor where eyebrows turned up, and he saw, you know, Deep Breath where Matt Smith was in Peter Capaldi's first episode, and he saw, you know, Twice Upon a Time where you had the first Doctor in the last story of the 12th Doctor. That could have been seen as disrespectful. Peter Capaldi's big regeneration episode and the limelight stolen from him by the first Doctor turning up. Point is, all of these ideas have happened since Russell T Davies did Doctor Who, and Russell T Davies, in his brain, he's still, every time he sees something in the series, he's going to be thinking, oh, what would I have done with that idea? Well, then he comes back and it's not what would I have done with that idea, but what can I do with that idea? So you take the guy who wrote Journey's End and the next Doctor, you throw into the mix Twice Upon a Time and Day of the Doctor, and what do you get? You get David Tennant coming back as a Doctor for one episode only.
My only thing on that would be David Tennant and Catherine Tate coming back is a huge deal for a certain generation of viewer, and also because you know, as big as Doctor Who was under Stephen Moffat, I do think it was the last time, certainly in the UK, that I think Doctor Who was properly a big deal in the public imagination.
It was huge, Who Shot JR level television.
Yeah. You know, and so I can't help but feel that if you're going to bring them back and then do this kind of complex story about how, oh, it's David Tennant, but it's not the David Tennant, you know, he's the regeneration of Jodie Whittaker, but he's going to regenerate into Ncuti Gatwa. And I feel like it was like, well, I'm not going to watch the next series if it's still this convoluted nonsense. Like, if you're going to draw in a new, like, that audience, do you know what I mean? You don't want to alienate them at the same time.
That was always my wariness of, because we had, when we were talking about the Timeless Children rumours before the Timeless Children came in, and it being a kind of pre-Hartnell Doctor, and my issue was that I didn't know whether it was or not, was or wasn't. My issue was I couldn't see how they explained that in the series without tying themselves up in knots, and I couldn't see how they get a story out of it, an actual dramatic story out of it.
But
I still can't. And I
still
still don't think they explained it without tying themselves up in knots. So unless you have Chibnall coming in to write a scene with David Tennant explaining how he's come back as a new Doctor.
But then it's harder to explain David Tennant has come back from 15 years ago than it is to just show on screen Jodie Whittaker changing into David
He's
Tennant.
barely aged.
Yeah, I think he has.
I'm saying, I'm talking in terms of the fiction. It's harder to tell an audience. Do you remember that series you saw 15 years ago? It's actually still happening now. Than it is to just show him
time travel.
Yeah,
but that's the point. So why is it any harder to explain? And plus, okay, do you want a precedent for this? In 1975, they said, oh, let's make a story where we see the guy who invented the Daleks, and they just showed you a story where the guy invented the Daleks. Now, off the page, that sounds like it could be a crazy, convoluted idea, but they literally just turn up and say, this is the guy who created the Daleks. Having David Tennant be the next Doctor after Jodie Whittaker is no harder than saying David Tennant is the next Doctor after Jodie Whittaker. That's 8 words and it's done. 9 words, sorry. I didn't count as I was saying them. I just guessed.
We'll see. Stay tuned,
Yeah.
as a wise man once said.
Yeah. Are we happy to see him?
Yeah. I mean, I think I would be more happy to see him and Catherine Tate as just the 10th Doctor and Donna. You know, just a little missing adventure.
Well, it could
Great.
be.
You know, because they are great together and they have that undeniable kind of chemistry that I think the best kind of Doctor and companion pairings have, when it is just like, oh, they're mates in real life as well, and that comes across in the story. So I think, yeah, I'm happy to see them again, in spite of myself.
I'd like to see Matt Smith,
Mm.
but partly because Matt Smith is so sweetly like still psyched by the series and by the role, and he's still so obviously like nostalgic for playing this part. And if you get Matt Smith, get Karen Gillan back, and that really would be a coup, given where Karen Gillan is.
Well, yeah.
And I think they could. I think that's a potential.
Mm.
Simon, you're happy, I'm guessing.
Yeah, I keep coming back to the idea that if the Doctor becomes the 10th Doctor again, does he do it in order to be familiar to Donna because he needs Donna because she's the Doctor Donna and therefore has all this energy locked away, and that has something to do with the regeneration, therefore battle for a lifetime? That's my idea.
Or alternately, he turns into the 10th Doctor again, and so he just, well, who did this Doctor know? And goes looking for her. Something along those lines. And because he's not the 10th Doctor as he was before, somehow, I mean, they may, that whole thing, the place where they left Donna, he could make that part of the story. This is Russell T Davies. So, you know, he's one for bringing weird stuff up into the program, isn't he?
I think all bets are off. I really do. I think we can't presume anything. I hope it's not as transparent as just getting as many names on the list to get viewers bums on seats. I hope it isn't that. I hope that everyone is there for a reason. I think that's the thing.
Right. We'll probably be back next week to talk about Matt Smith, but until then, I was JR.
I was Mark.
I was Matt.
And I was Simon.
And it will be Paul McGann. Right. I shall press the stop button.